Therapist. Posted by user EpicDepic. No one understands what I saw, not a goddamn person. Mark looked up at his therapist, who was writing something on a notepad. Mark, can you explain the person you saw again? Replied the therapist, who stopped writing in the book and was looking at Mark. I told you, it ain't a person. Mark took a long pause before talking again. That thing took my daughter, my wife, and my sister's dog, said Mark in a gloomy tone. The therapist began writing in her pad again while she responded. And what did this thing look like? About 7 foot tall, big yellow teeth, an enormous grin with black flesh, and a hungry look in its dead eyes. The therapist stopped all of a sudden and said, So what did it do to your family, if you don't mind me asking? Mark looked up at her with tears in his eyes and said, Ripped them apart, dug into their bones, and pulled out chunks of flesh. The therapist was slightly taken aback by this statement. And why didn't this thing attack you? Responded the therapist in a slightly worried voice. Mark took a deep breath and said, It looked straight in my eyes and said, We are the same. It then darted out the door into the dark night. I don't know what it means by that, but it probably isn't something good. Mark then stared at the ground with tears in his eyes, trying to hold back from having a breakdown right there on the floor. He then started again. You believe me, don't you? Mark stared up at his therapist with hopeful eyes. The therapist thought for a while before responding with, I think that's enough for today. Why don't you go back to your room, and we'll pick up where we left off. But you believe me, don't you? Mark asked. I'm not crazy, you know that. The therapist responded with, We can talk about it tomorrow. I think you need some rest now. In reality, she didn't have the heart to tell Mark he was acting insane. Reluctantly, Mark stood up and walked out the door, where he was escorted by 3 armed guards to the door of his cell. The therapist stood up also. Taking her notepad with her, she walked down the hall to her boss, who was standing in front of Mark's cell, looking in through the one-way glass window. How's he doing? The boss asked when he saw her approach. Not very good. He's still convinced that a strange black creature killed his family. The boss looked back at Mark, who was sitting on his bed with his head in his hands. Poor soul, he responded with. Doesn't know it was him. The therapist spoke again. How do the police know it was him that did it? She said in a questioning voice. The boss replied quickly with, They got a call about a domestic violence issue from the neighbors. Apparently they heard screaming and smashing coming from Mark's apartment. When the police got there, the kid was dead with 14 stab wounds in her stomach, and the dog was lying on the ground with its neck slashed open. They found him on top of his wife, stabbing her repeatedly in the neck. Took 4 guys to get him off her. In Mark's cell, he was sitting on his bed, thinking about what that thing was that had killed his family, when a sudden weight pushed the bed down slightly, like someone had joined him on the bed and sat down next to him. Mark looked beside him, on his bed, and the thing was sitting there with a big grin on its face. What's he looking at? Asked the therapist, after seeing Mark look to his side all of a sudden. Don't know, replied the boss. Maybe he's having another episode, he said again, looking at Mark, who had a very disturbed expression. You did a great job, said the thing in a raspy voice. How would you like to do another job for me? It involves getting rid of more people. Mark stopped crying. Looking up at the thing, he was no longer scared. He stared at the thing for a while, and eventually a small smile began to form on his lips. Then he started to laugh, a small snicker at first, but it then became a loud, wheezing laugh. It was so loud it sounded like he had heard the funniest joke in the world, except the laugh was void of any humor. The thing began to laugh as well, until they were both laughing hysterically. For the first time in Mark's life, he had found a true friend. The school experiment. I am trapped in my own school. Posted by user, not necessarily. It was supposed to be an exciting day. Today was our official 5-day Year 9 camp. We were all hyped up, and almost everyone attended school on that day. The camp was supposed to go from Monday to Friday. I should have realized the camp was a cover-up for something sinister as soon as I saw that it was free. We all huddled up that day in the shedded area, ready to get on our school bus. The trip wouldn't be too long, as our school was already far away from town. It was in a secluded area in the woods. That wasn't a bad thing, though, and our school was massive. By massive, I really mean it. We have about 100 rooms, most of which are always empty. We have 20 ovals. Even the main area, where we all hang out, is the size of like 2 ovals. So there we were, all of us in grade 9, waiting for the bus to arrive so we could go to our promised camp. All the other grades were on camp, so there were about 180 of us in the whole school. After a very long time of waiting, we were all escorted to the main hall. We sat down in our seats. Lots of men with shotguns came into the hall from all doors and surrounded the perimeter. The teachers all exited the hall in fear. A tall woman in a lab coat came from behind the stage and started to set up the projectors. "What the?" my friend Corey stuttered. A student suddenly got up from his chair in front of us and booked it for the open doors. He didn't even get close before we all heard a deafening bang that made our ears ring. Blood sprayed everywhere, and the student that had once been running out was now on the floor, dead. Everyone screamed, but the woman at the front quickly silenced us. No one wanted to have the same fate as the poor kid on the floor, so they all shut up quickly. The hall was so silent, you could hear a pin drop. The projector started up, and we saw a logo on the screen. Perceptions Research Organization, PRO. The woman then started her long speech and explained all the rules to some sick experiment. She called it the school experiment. I'll try my best to transcribe her speech from memory here. Welcome, fellow students, to our new experiment. We are a research organization, and today we are conducting a new experiment in your school. My name is Ms. Wen, and I am the coordinator for today. I will introduce you to this experiment. You will be left to survive in school for 5 days. The catch is that we will only allow one person out at the end of 5 days. You must all kill each other out to survive. If there are multiple people at the end of the 5 days, our guards will eliminate people at random. However, for the 5 days, our guards will not interfere with anything and will simply watch the school perimeters. Any attempts to escape will result in death. On the school grounds, you are allowed to do anything except contacting anyone on the outside. We will leave weapons and food around the school, and it is your responsibility to get it. You will be provided with a heavy-duty wristband. Make sure you wear it, as that is what we are using to monitor you. The band monitors your blood pressure, heart rate, and location. Cameras have already been set up around the whole school. Thank you. The actual speech was obviously much longer than that, but those were all the important points I could cover. The whole hall was silent, except for a few gasps. We were made to sit in the hall for about 20 minutes extra. They were apparently setting up loot around the school. The masked guards with shotguns watched us while we waited. No one dared to escape. 4 guards gave everyone in the hall a wristband and made them put it on. It was made out of hard rubber. It didn't have a buckle. It had a clamp-type system where once you put it on, you'd need a special tool to take it off. I made sure to put my one a little loose on my wrist, but the guard watched me put it on and immediately made me tighten it. Then suddenly, all the armed guards exited the hall along with Dr. Wen. The school PA system turned on, and a deep male voice spoke. "The game has begun." We were all confused at first, dazed at what had just happened. Some students were silently crying. Some just had solemn expressions on their faces. The peace, though, didn't last long. There was a commotion at the back of the hall. I looked behind me and heard blood-curdling screams. People were fighting. Blood was everywhere on the floor. It was a bloodbath. I took Corey's hand and pulled him with me out of the hall. Right outside the door, there was a small pistol. I picked it up along with the ammo and continued running. I made my way to the computer labs as I heard more screams from the hall. My phone does not have reception. Corey and I are typing this in the computer lab at school. Thank God school Wi-Fi exists and VPNs exist. Please help me, guys. I don't know what to do.